So what we'll do is like, that is the script that I am about to like share. We will like actually use that in the Ramnex VM, which is like free to download. Okay, so in the desktop folder, I have actually copied paste the meteor.com file, which we were actually analyzing right now. Okay, so now to execute that script, what you can do is you can just write ollie vba.py. Okay, so this is a Python script, and just give it the name of the file that you want to analyze, and then just press enter. Okay, so let's do that. And now you can see actually what I will do is like I will run this again, piping it with the more command. And now let's do that. Okay, so now in the screen we can see that it has actually, we don't have to unzip the software how we did that in office maliscan.exe, but we just need to give the word file path, and you can see that it has actually extracted the macros from there. The set auto open is calling the hatch function, and hatch is again doing some other stuff. Okay, so this is something. But one of the good part now which Ollie VBA actually does for you is the same way how like we were discussing about the Kappa software, which where it does the analysis and give you some better idea, okay, what that script might do and what are the functionality in a very, very easy to read, understand English language. So post this macro will end, actually you will see something very interesting. So now it's end, and now it has analyzed this macro code, and it will actually tell you like what are the capabilities. So let's go to that. Yeah, so now you can see that, okay, these are some of the things which it has kind of extracted. It's like so it is telling that there, if you don't know about auto open, so you can know from here that, okay, the auto open command, it runs when the Word document is opened. Auto open run when the Excel workbook is opened, and workbook.open, it runs when the Excel workbook is opened. So there are two different kind of function which does exactly the same work. Once you open the Word file, either this function will be called, either this function or either this function. So this one has the auto open function. Okay, and now a suspicious thing which it has seen over here in the macro is like it has some string called as chr, which may be used to like hold the obfuscate string in the macros. And then we see that, okay, it is having the other suspicious functions like open cell or wscript or cell, which can actually be used to kind of run a script on Windows operating system, or maybe another file. And it is also having the run command, and it is like it's extract like, okay, it is saving to file, it is writing to file, and then it is downloading something from this URL, and the executable file name is 2.14.exe. Okay, so now what happened, like even though you maybe don't know about better about the Visual Basics, so you can use that to kind of get the overall idea what that macro is capable of just by using this tool. So I hope like this will make you happy, like, okay, now you get some kind of a malicious doc file, and there's a huge macro code enabled in that, and you don't have time to understand that, or maybe you are very new to Visual Basics macro code. So you can just run this ollivba.py, and it will actually kind of give you a better understanding, like, okay, what are the capability of that macro files are. Okay, so so any questions still now from this script?
No.
Okay. So what we'll do is now we will stop with the analyzing the doc file. Okay. The next class I have kept it for analyzing the PDF file, and some planning is there also to kind of I'm planning to kind of also work on the some of the cases where cell codes are embedded, and how to kind of extract the cell code and maybe do a evaluation of that cell code. So that's something I've kept for next class. Okay, so this is something which these are some of the analysis that we can actually perform in the malicious doc file. Okay, so you have three tools in your category: the MS Word software, using the Office Malice Scanner, or using the ollivba.py. Okay, and now we will jump to the a very interesting part and very powerful part, powerful feature in malicious malware analysis is the memory forensics. Okay, which is also my favorite. Okay, so let's quickly jump to that. So the first question is like, why memory forensics? Okay, so the reason for that is, now most of the attacker in real time right now, they are mostly deploying the malware, which they try to run that only in the memory area. They are not creating any disk based artifacts. Okay, so that's the reason memory forensics is the utmost important nowadays in the current scenario, because the cases that I have worked on, which I was sharing, we were not finding any kind of disk-based artifacts on most of the system. But post performing the memory forensics, you can actually get a lot of other details of what the what the malware is doing or not doing. Okay, something like that. And so let's go to that one by one. Okay. So now the first part, how you can like kind of analyze the. One thing I want to know, like, do you guys also have worked on this memory forensics earlier?
No,
No, Pragyan, but like I've studied a little about memory forensics when I was studying for CHFI.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah. So thing is, like, when we talk about the memory, so we have to kind of access the RAM memory. Okay, and RAM memory actually, there are two ways you can do that. Okay, so one of the way which actually clicked my mind, actually when I was working on memory forensics, like, which I developed on my own, was actually like, I see that there are a lot of softwares like, uh, that can capture the RAM memory for you. Okay, but most of them are like kind of quite costly, or like sometime won't work those software. So suppose there's a software called as Belkasoft RAM capture. Okay, software. So what you can do is you can just download that and run that in the suspicious system, and what it will do, it will capture the RAM memory and give it to you. But the problem over there are two problems. Okay, the first problem is that Belkasoft software might not work on all system. It might work on Windows 7 version, or some versions of Windows 10, but not on all the Windows version. Okay, and also the other difficulty is that when you execute another exe file, suppose I am executing Belkasoft software on a suspicious system, so what it will do is, like, it will also create a lot of artifacts in the RAM memory, and those artifacts might corrupt or overwrite the existing artifacts of the malwares in the system. Okay, and it can also be, there might be a scenario that that the malware is knowing that, okay, if someone does a capture from Belkasoft, let's exterminate myself. Okay, so those are the things that can come, that can you can face a problem while kind of analyzing the RAM memory, getting a capture using the known tools. Okay, so one thing which it actually clicked my mind while I was working on that, was actually performing the memory forensics on hyperfile.sys. Okay, so what happened, like, when you go to the command prompt and do, rather than shut down, you do a hibernation. Okay, I think this might have hibernate. Yeah, so it has the hibernate option over here. Okay, so what it does is like, it actually, if you go to the C folder, so let's go to the C folder. Okay, and let's do dir. So you're not seeing, so it will actually create a hyperfile.sys in your system. So to see that, so with the normal dir command, you won't be able to see. You have to run dir/a, which will actually show you the hidden files. So now when we see the hidden file, we see that hyperfile.sys is getting created over here. Okay, and the size of that is actually around 13 GB. Okay, so there are a lot of things which I want to discuss, which is not related to malware, but I want to discuss from the forensics background, which will be actually helpful, quite a bit helpful for you. Is that hyperfile.sys normally gets created, you can create it, it is an exact copy of your RAM memory. Okay, it's an exact copy. So suppose in my system, my RAM memory is around 32 GB. So if I do a hibernation, it will actually create a hyperfile.sys, which will be actually of 32 GB. Okay, it will actually occupy that space. And now suppose, if I want, okay, now if I do a hibernation, I don't want to create 32 GB of file, maybe just 16 GB of file, the half of that. So there is a command called as power cfg. Okay, so for executing that command, actually you need to open the command prompt as admin mode, And once you open that, I go to cd slash, and if I do dir/a, so you can see haverfile.sys is there. Okay, so what happened is like when I was actually developing the tool, I was actually targeting the haverfile.sys file. Okay, so that was my, so I have created a software which was the version 1. Okay, and it was actually working, it was performing the RAM memory forensics, working on the haverfile.sys, rather than you using any tools like Belkasoft or any other tools to capture the RAM memory. And the useful part was that I don't have to introduce any new tool in that. And how I was able to achieve that was that when suppose I have a suspicious system, which I want to investigate or perform the RAM memory forensics, what I used to tell the local tech team that, okay, you guys download my software and execute that with the admin privilege. And what it will do is like it will actually hibernate the system. Once like kind of it will hibernate the system as soon as you execute my software, and what it will do is like it will actually kind of create a haverfile.sys. Okay, and then I tell the like local tech team that once the system is like in the hibernate mode, again turn on the system. Okay, so what will happen, the system will be turned on, and that haverfile.sys I will be able to extract, and then I was actually performing a lot of memory forensics on that. Okay, and now there were situations where the hibernate mode were actually not present. Okay, so how you can do that, how you can turn off the hibernation, how you can turn on that hibernation is using this command, power cfg. Okay, so power cfg -h, if I do a off, so you can see that my hibernate option has gone, it's no longer available. Okay, and even my space in C drive has been like kind of extended with 13 GB. So this will be actually also more useful, like suppose you are running sort of a space in Windows. So what you can do is like, if suppose your hibernate option is on, you can quickly go and do power cfg -h off, and it will give you the RAM space for your use for any other purpose. So right now my 13 GB will be more over there, and to turn on that you just need to do power cfg -h on. So now I will see that my hibernate option is again back over here. I can do a hibernate of the system. Okay, so what this do is like it will actually, when you do a hibernate, it will actually create a haverfile.sys, and then you can kind of do a forensics out of that. So now I want to ask you a question, that haverfile.sys is created. Okay, and when you turn on the system next time, how does the computer know that it needs to put the haverfile.sys RAM content into the RAM memory? So what happened, like when you do hibernation and you again turn on the system, the reason why like the system get turned on again back on the same state which it was turned off is because when you turn on the system, the haverfile.sys is loaded in the RAM memory. Okay, once it's loaded in the RAM memory, you will see the exact same thing which you were seeing when you before the hibernation. Okay, so what happened is now is that I just want to ask from you guys just one guesswork. Like suppose I had done a hibernation, the haverfile.sys got created, the system got turned off, I turned on the system, the haverfile.sys was loaded, and again I turned off the system, and again like when I turned on, the haverfile.sys was not like I was not seeing the again the suspended state. So any guesses how Windows operating system knows that okay, this time the Windows operating system needs to load the haverfile.sys in RAM memory, and what time it doesn't need to load the haverfile.sys in the RAM memory? Any guesses how these things work?
No, okay.
Okay, and so any questions till now regarding the haverfile.sys?
Pragyan, you were saying we can also reduce the size of that hyperfile.sys. Instead of
Yes.
13 GB, you said we can reduce it to half.
Yeah.
Half of. I mean, is this the same command we use for making that size into half, or
No,
we?
no. It's actually like I think I can't recall as of now. Maybe just a simple Google search will help. But I think it was something like as size, and
Mhm.
then you can give it something like 50. So it will actually like suppose for my RAM it is a 32 GB. It will actually save the hyper. It will always create the hyper field for 16 GB. Even I can give it as I think as 25. Okay, which
Okay.
will save 25% of the RAM. but this is the lowest value. You can't go below that. You can't do 24. It is always like from 25 to 100%. Okay.
Okay.
And yeah, and to see that, you can just do this like this, and let's see that. Okay. Okay, so I'm not seeing that option, but yeah, it is there. Okay, with a Google, simple Google search, you can get to know that. Okay, with that size option, you can actually set that RAM memory. It's very easy. Okay, and it's very helpful too. What happened, like if you keep the RAM memory hyperfill size as 50%, what it will do is like, because most of the time, what happens, suppose I'm using the 32 GB of RAM, so most of the time, most of the RAM will not be used. Okay, only 16 GB of might be used. Okay, so it's a no use to like just save the zeros blank data in your disk. So over there you can just tell Windows operating system to just save 16 GB of data, and it will be actually helpful to kind of, even like for my case, what I had to do is like, in my script I have actually written that, okay, suppose my software is running on a system, okay, which will be do the hibernation. So before that I check, okay, what's the size of the RAM and how much space is left in the hard drive. Okay, and what I do is like I compare them and I see that, okay, suppose the RAM size is 32 GB and I'm not seeing 32 GB of space in hard drive, then what I do is like I do power cfg hyphen h hyphen size 25. Okay, and then do a hibernation. So it will actually save 25% of the RAM, and post like you turn that on, you can perform the forensics on that 25% of the haberfield.sys. Okay, so just 1 minute, guys. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so thing is like, I was talking about the power cfg command, and you can actually change the size of the haberfield.sys and all. Okay, so now we have the haberfield.sys, and the question is that how the Windows operating system does the work, that is, know that it this time it needs to the hibernation, it this time it needs to kind of perform a normal boot up of the system. How it does is like, when you do the hibernation, it actually creates the haberfield. Okay, and in the starting binary of that haberfield.sys is actually a mark. Okay, so next time, like suppose I turn on the system, it will tell me like, do you want to resume from the hibernation? So I will tell yes. If I do that, what it will do is like, it will actually wipe that first 4 binary from the haberfield.sys, and it will clear that. So next time you turn on the system, it will tell that, okay, this it will tell you that no hibernation is kind of present now. Okay, so this is something you can do. But the good part is that what you can extract from here is that, when you kind of just do a normal shutdown of the system, okay, the haberfield.sys file is not totally deleted. It's always there. Okay, so in some of the cases, suppose you are kind of analyzing there is scenario where you don't know what's the date of compromise of the system, and suppose you think that, okay, the system might have got compromised 1 month back. Okay, and now you can't capture the RAM memory from the current system, which is 1 month back. But over there, you can search for the haberfield.sys, see that luckily that you found that, okay, that haberfield.sys is 28 days old. So you can extract that and do a processing of that, and you can get to know, okay, what all process or files or what all connections were made from that system 28 days back, and it's a huge benefit while analyzing the systems. So I hope you will agree on that. Okay, so any questions till now regarding the importance of haberfield.sys? No. Okay. Okay, guys. So let's.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm audible.
Yeah, Pragyan, my question is, can a malware delete hyperfill.sys entirely?
Yeah, it can definitely do that. Suppose the malware has an admin privilege, so it can either delete the either turn off the hibernation or kind of it can wipe the hyperfill.sys. It can definitely do that. There is nothing that can stop it. Yeah.
So have you seen some malware before which had this evasion property where it was deleting this file? Have you seen something like that before?
Okay, so for in that, my answer is like, okay, I have gone through some documents where malware were actually kind of utilizing anti-forensics method, where they were actually kind of also deleting the hyperfill.sys. But I have not worked on the sample. But yeah, there are like lot of malwares. Suppose the malware author. So what happened? Like most of the time, malware attacker have the knowledge of how to perform, how to compromise the system, but they don't have the knowledge of the forensics artifacts it creates. Okay, but the thing is that most of the malware attacker are quite smart, so they know what the forensics will create, and then it will like actually delete those stuff. So there are like lot of malwares right now which can actually actually does the anti forensics, and it will delete those files. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so now thing is like we have the Haverfield.sys, or either we can do a live RAM capture using the Belkasoft software and all the stuff. Now, suppose now we have the data. Okay, so we have the data on which we have to analyze, and now the question is how to analyze. Okay, and after we give the answer to how to analyze, we will see like, okay, we have analyzed and what to infer from that analyzed data. Okay, so now let's see what why it will be helpful, because the thing is like there are a lot of malwares, as I told, like rootkits and all, which will be actually existing only in RAM memory. And the powerful feature of rootkit is that suppose you run a process hacker or task manager, so what will happen is like that rootkit can actually fool those software like task manager, and it will actually hide its process. So if you run the task manager, you can't see that, okay, that process, malicious process is running inside that. It will actually fool the task manager even that, okay, that process is not existing in the system, but it will be running inside the RAM memory. Okay, so these are the condition where RAM memory forensics will be very useful, where you can actually see the hidden process running in the memory. Okay, so one of the thing by which it does is that, let me just oh yeah. Okay, so this is one of the snap which I want to share with you. So what happened, like when a lot of process are running in your system, so there is a linked list that's get created by the your operating system. So when suppose you are running the task manager, what it will do is like how it does that, like what all processes are running in the system, it will go to that linked list which is existing in the memory, and it will like see, okay, this is the first process which a.exe, it is pointing to b.exe, it is pointing to c.exe, and that's how it will make a list of all the processes that are running in the system. So now if a rootkit actually is running in your system, what it will do is like it will change the forward link from here directly to this one, this node. Okay, from here it will point to this one, and the back link it will modify that from here to here. So what will happen, this process, this node is now out of this linked list. So when the task manager will actually kind of analyze the linked list, it will only tell, okay, this process is running and then this process is running. It won't tell you that this process is running. Okay, so this is what rootkit actually does, and that linked list actually name is eProcess, where like it get the list of all the processes that are running in the system. Okay, so this is what rootkit can do. Okay, and it can fool lot of softwares. Okay, so now how to check that, you can only know about that only using the RAM memory. Then and post that there is no other objective, no other tool, and RAM memory will give you a full clear idea, okay, if the system is compromised or not. Okay, so and the malware can't hide from RAM memory, that's a good part. Okay, so there are a lot of artifacts you can collect from memory. Okay, the first thing is like what all processes are running, what all network connections are there, what all files are opened, what all registry hives are currently being accessed by the process. Like suppose there are some encrypted executable which the malware is running, so you can get the decrypted content in the from the RAM memory. You can get the password, even like suppose there's a ransomware which is utilizing symmetric key encryption to encrypt the file. So you can even get the encryption key from the RAM memory. Okay. And you can also get to know that, okay, what the pages are currently loaded in the web page. So actually, I think 5 years back, I was working on a software called as Browser Artifacts Forensics, where kind of like I made a software which actually kind of perform a browser forensics and tell you, okay, what all website you have visited or not. Okay. So what happened is like there was a scenario where suppose an attacker is suppose uh, trolling someone from his Facebook account. Okay. And now when the police came to kind of get the history of all the website that the person has visited, what the person did was like he quickly kind of deleted all the histories from his system, the Chrome history and all. So what my tool was actually able to do is like, what is to do is like it will be what it does is like it gets the haberfield.sys from the system and then do a string search for all string search in that RAM memory. Okay. And it extract all those strings which start with HTTP. Okay. So the benefit of that was like what I did was like I visited a URL, I visited one profile, one of my friend profile, like facebook.com/profile ID, and then I deleted my history. Okay. And at that moment of time, after some time, I collected a RAM memory and performed a forensics. So that link was actually existing till then on the RAM memory. Okay. And now after getting the link, my software, what it does is like it visits the link and then download the profile image. And from there, what happened is like in that scenario, I will be able to tell, okay, that suspect is actually knowing the complaining, like who has complained about that person, he is knowing about that. And like they have some kind of connections, like kind of they know each other. Okay. So that's how, so the lot of ways in which like the RAM memory can be pretty useful in like performing a lot of, it's not just limited to malware, it's also related to performing like a lot of bribery case or harassment case and a lot of other cases. Okay. So now what happened, like when you have to kind of analyze the memory, we actually, there is a gold standard tool. The name of the tool is Volatility, and with the help of this tool you can most of the time analysts perform the memory forensics. Okay. So let's deep dive in the Volatility framework. So Volatility is actually free to download. You can download from the volatility.org website, and let's see like, okay, what all things. So what I think is like, guys, let's take a 5-minute break and let's then deep dive in the Volatility. Hope that's fine, right?
Yeah. So again, one question.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you said that we can find the encryption keys of ransomware from memory forensics. Will
Yes.
you give such an example in like the further classes? Because I would like to see how to get the encryption keys.
Yeah. So that thing is actually highly limited. The reason for that, as I told, like it's only work when the encryption is happening with a symmetric key, where there's only key that is kind of in, like in asymmetric, there's a public and private key. Where,
Okay, okay. Yeah.
right?
So like all the ransomwares recently, they use both the encryption symmetric and asymmetric. So you're saying that we can only see that in ransomwares which are employing only symmetric encryption.
Yes. So what happened, like you can get the public key from the, for the asymmetric also, but the problem is that you can't decrypt from that key. But with the asymmetric, if you get the key, actually you can use that to decrypt the thing. So it's,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
So we can find the public key from asymmetric encryption also, but obviously it is of no use since even that key is encrypted.
Correct. Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Yes. Yeah. So what happened was like I was actually testing that 1 month before. I was working on a tool and I was actually testing that. So I created a ransomware, a small ransomware using the Python language, and it was having a specified key by which it would like encrypt the file. So what happened is like after I ran that, then I took the RAM memory. Okay. And in the RAM memory, even like without knowing much about which process I was doing, I just did a string search and I got the keys in that actually. Okay.
And
Okay. So can we see this in the next class again?
Yeah, sure. We'll do that. Not a
Okay.
problem.
Okay, fine.
and Pragyan, what do we do for asymmetric key?
Yeah, for asymmetric key, we can't do anything. The only thing we can do is like we can stop the encryption. Okay. So
Okay.
actually, I have my own research paper in SANS, okay, regarding like stopping the ransomware encryption, okay. And the thing is that what it does is like it is actually very useful. I tested that on various ransomware, even like GoldenEye ransomware, which was used in London cyber attack, okay. And thing was like that software is actually able to kind of stop the ransomware encryption. So what that GoldenEye ransomware was doing was that it was actually overwriting the MBR record, okay. And yeah, so what it does, like suppose that ransomware execute in my system, it will, before encryption, it will do a overwriting of my MBR record, and it will then do a restart of the system. So once you restart the system, what will do is like it will give you a fake screen that your disk has been corrupted and it is analyzing the files, it is repairing your file system. But what is happening is like there is a malicious OS that has been loaded by the malware, and it is showing you a fake screen, and then it is encrypting all your files, and no one can stop that because your Windows is now not active. All your security controls are out of place because those are not running, no antivirus, nothing, and it will very easily encrypt all your files, and then it will show you the Bitcoin message that you have to pay the Bitcoin, okay. So those are the scenarios where I actually developed a software which actually kind of stop those kind of encryption. And also it was very helpful, like there were a lot of other ransomware like Godzilla and some Loki and all, so where the encryption was actually stopped in just 5 seconds. So it will detect the encryption, that encryption is happening, and then it will like actually quickly know, okay, what process is doing the encryption, and then it will quickly terminate that process and put that in the quarantine folder. So maybe later I will just share that research paper and you can maybe go through that. Okay.
Yeah, fine, Ricky.
Sure. So so let's take a 5-minute break again, and then we will like start with the volatility framework.